Have any? Yes, ma'am. Okay, so you talked about how diversity shows up on the campuses and how it's different. And what campuses are you guys coming from? Mankato. Whoop whoop. North Dakota State. Whoop whoop. Bethel.
You're a little biased towards Native Americans taking away our mascot.
Well, let's talk about that.
Well, kind of both, because they teach us about all their courageous, when they were before all sporting events, they honor the Native Americans, but yet the Native Americans try to take it away. So kind of cool.
And I think that's interesting, because I don't know about you. Has anyone ever gone to a funeral? Please raise your hand if you've gone to a funeral. Has anybody at a funeral ever got up and said, "That dude sucked. He was a horrible dad. It was just bad." Has anybody ever experienced that at a funeral? No. What do they say about dead people at the funeral? They say all the good stuff. Now, you know some of these people who have died, and you know they were not as good as they talk about at the funeral, right? So what we do to dead people is that we say, great, let's honor the dead people. Which makes sense. Do any of you want people to say bad stuff on your last days? No. Right? So what does that have to do with the mascot thing? What do we do to dead people? We honor them. Right? Hopefully we bury them. Sometimes we put them in urns and put them on our thing and spread them on our cereal. That's just me. But so when we talk about that even the Washington Redskins, or we talk about blah blah blah, what we do is that we take. Well, I want to link this back to that, right? So in your category about TVs and movies, did you have mostly pluses or mostly minuses? Mostly minuses. Why did you all have mostly minuses, do you think? A lot of stereotypes. What is a stereotype?
All Asian people are nerds.
That all Asian people are nerds, that what? So it's like a small idea about a whole group of people. How many people have met a Native American? Please raise your hand. Did they have red skin? No. That's a problem, right? Because that's a stereotype that we're applying to a whole group of people. How many people have met a Sioux? Have they tried to punch you in the head?
No. I lived in Sioux City.
You went to Sioux City?
I lived there.
Oh, you lived there. There's a whole city of Sioux people, and nobody was duking it out, right? What about Irish? Anybody ever know somebody Irish? Do they fight? Okay. I knew there was going to be a hole in my story somewhere, right? But the idea is that what media does is it takes stereotypes and it magnifies them 1,000,000 times and broadcasts them all over the place. And so if we support stereotypes, we can't ever get past anything. For example, lifeguards have a stereotype. Do they all fit the stereotype? No. I've seen Baywatch, and some of you do not look like Baywatch people.
What are you trying to say?
Right? I did see one guy in a Speedo with a full body Speedo. I was like, no, that's not Pamela Anderson. That's not. Oh, she had some work done?
Do they do running training here for that?
Do you guys do running training? Do you do beach rescues? No. All right. But the basic idea is that stereotypes limit what a person can be and what they can do. All right? So there should be a card at your table with a little character like this. If you can just pick that card up. Does everybody have that card? Yep. Does everybody have a copy of this? All right. So I want to ask a couple of basic questions. First of all, what is bigotry? What is bigotry? Has anyone ever seen a bigot on television or know what a bigot is? What is a bigot? Has anyone heard the word before? Yeah, okay. So what is a bigot?
You don't know what he's for, but you know what he's against.
Okay, so you don't know what a person is for, but you do know what they're against. And typically they're against what? Different people different from them, right? So they're typically against people who are different from themselves. All right? Has anyone encountered a bigot? That's the piece. At least nod your head if you've at least encountered someone who is like, I hate these people and I can't tell you why. Right? Or I can tell you why, but the reasons make no sense. Right? Anybody like that? Okay. He's like, no, I can't think of anybody. So if you can't think of anybody, it might be you. No, but so one of the things that's really interesting about bigots is that when I was coming up, there was a guy on television that his name was Archie Bunker. YouTube him, right? Because this guy was hilarious, but he hated everybody, right? Kind of like Steve Carell from The Office. Anybody seen that show? Right? Yeah. So what was the guy's name on The Office? Mike. What's his name? Michael Scott. Michael Scott on the Office. So he, but this guy named Archie hated everybody. He would talk bad about everybody and had a bad name to call everybody. But he was on television for 15 years. Your parents and your grandparents loved this guy, right? But he was offensive. Why do you think that he stayed on television for 15 years if he was offensive? People liked it. Why?
Because it fed into their beliefs.
Because partly it fed into their beliefs. The other part is that we were able to laugh at him. Right? And it was funny because he had a guy in his life that would say, he'd say, Archie, what you're saying is ridiculous. Here are the facts. Let me give you the truth about what you're saying. And when Archie would get the facts, one of the ways he would respond to getting those facts would be to say, you're an idiot. That's dumb. Meathead. Dumb Pollock. I mean, he would come up with all of these things to refute the real data. Because when you meet a bigoted person, bigotry is an emotion. What happens when you try to apply logic to emotions? It doesn't work, right? Some of you have liked people that you had no business liking, and it didn't make sense. It was funny because I was attracted to this girl, and my mother, her response to this girl was, she's very interesting looking. Did your parents ever do that to you? Okay. My parents would do that all the time. She's so interesting. Right? What she was trying to say was this girl was ugly, but she had a great personality. I liked her. Right? But it didn't make sense. And so when we try to use logic on emotions, it doesn't work. So what helps people change their emotions if logic doesn't work? Experience. Other emotions. All right? And what's the most powerful emotion that one can have for someone else? Love. I'll come back to that later. All right? So next, what is prejudice? You guys have had this stuff in school. What's prejudice? It's something against a specific type of people. What else is prejudice? How many people have been taught that prejudice is bad? You're not supposed to be prejudiced. Please raise your hand if you've been taught that in your school. Okay? Well, I want to tell you that prejudice is good. It's good. I'm walking down the street at 11 o'clock at night. I see 6 guys on the same side of the street that I'm on, and they're tussling with each other. It's kind of dark out. What decision do I make? I'm going to cross the street. Why? Because I'm prejudiced. I'm looking at those cats and I'm like, oh, I don't want to have to deal with this. I think I've done with this before. My friends have talked about this situation, and I don't want to deal with that. So I am prejudging the situation. And I cross the street. And what would you say about my decision to cross the street? It's a good decision. It makes sense. Right? Now the problem with prejudiced people is that they take the context Within the context that I was operating in, that was a good decision. But what prejudiced people do is they take their decision out of its context and try to apply it in all areas of life. So, if I take that same decision out of its context, and now I'm at the Mall of America, I'm walking down the aisle, I see 5 guys in front of me. If I use that same logic that I used on the street, what decision do I make? I'm going to cross the aisle. But what's the problem once I cross the aisle? There's 5 more people standing over here. So now I'm like, oh my God, there's 5 more people. So I turn over here, and guess what? It's 5 more people. So the logic in the context made sense. But now I am going what? At the Mall of America, I'm starting to become crazy. Right? And so what I would like to offer you is to challenge and ask yourself the fears that I have about, it was so funny, somebody asked a question, they're like, is it okay to go down Lake Street in Minneapolis? They're like, is that safe? Yeah, it's safe if you're not a fool, right? If you're not, throwing money out the windows or, going up to into strange people's apartments and stuff like, yeah, I mean, you'll be fine, right? So prejudice is a good thing within its context, but I want you to challenge any time that you have those kinds of feelings and emotions. And lastly, what is discrimination? What is discrimination? So let's go back to bigotry. What did I say bigotry was? Is it a thought, is it a feeling, or is it an action? It is a feeling, it is an emotion. Bigotry is an emotion, which can be overcome by love, and we'll get to that in just a second. So what do you think prejudice is? Is it a thought, a feeling, or an action? It is in fact a thought. You can overcome prejudice with knowledge. So the more you know, the more you know. All right? And discrimination, lastly, is an action. All right? So discrimination is an action. And it's basically saying, because of some feature you can't control about yourself, I'm going to limit your access to something. You're not coming to my party based on something, or I don't think you should get this job based on something that you can't control. All right? So that is that. So I wanted to go to the last part of this, and if you can. So I want you to tell me what's going on in that picture. What's happening in the picture? Did everybody get a card? So I was doing a training with some teachers and adults, and they were like, when I was coming up, back in the day, everybody in the neighborhood could get, they could all chastise you. They could all tell you, what you're doing wrong. And not only did you get in trouble at school, but you went home and you got in trouble at home. Those were the good old days. That's when people had respect. Anybody heard stories similar to that? We used to walk, uphill, both ways, in the snow, barefooted. Any of those kinds of stories, right? Yeah. And so I had to back up and have the adults in the room think about why it is that kids typically don't give respect. And so these are the 5 reasons that I came up with why young people typically don't aren't or adults aren't respectable in a sense. So on the back, The first reason that we don't give or people don't get respect is because people say, do as I say, not as I do. Right? And it's very hard to respect someone who won't do what they're asking you to do. Right? So here's an example. And this is a workplace performance answer. So if you're a supervisor, let's say you're a supervisor, and you tell your employees to be at work at 8 o'clock. As a supervisor, what time should you be there? 7:30. Why? Because if you're there at 8 o'clock, you're late. Because as a supervisor, you need to be setting the example that they need to be there on time. Right? So that's how we don't get people's respect. Number 2, we'll come back to. Number 3, boys will be boys, or that's how it's always been. Why do we not respect people who say that kind of stuff? Or why is it difficult for them to earn our respect?
Because they're content with the way things are.
Because they're content with the way things are. Do things change? Yes. Many of you used to, use diapers, suck on, pacifiers, and most of you do not do that now. Most of you don't. Right? So things change. So the way you operate, the responsibilities that you have to also change. Number 4, people will say, that's not my child, or that's not my responsibility. And why is that problematic for people who are going to be leaders? I'm not cleaning that up. I didn't put that there. I'm not doing it. Not only does it pass the buck, have you ever been on an elevator and, because I tried this at the government center, I was on an elevator and I didn't push the button. Did I get to my destination quickly or did it take a long time? It took a really long time, right? Because if we're not in control of what we do, we're allowing somebody else to be in control of what we do, which means that when we get to our destination, it's going to take us a whole lot longer than if we do it ourselves. We don't have a Superman. We don't have a Wonder Woman. There's no person with a Green Lantern that's going to come rescue us. The problems that we face in our world have to be, they